Hello my fiery friends, the Infernoman here with the latest in budget deck technology. And for today's deck, it is time once again for one of the most awesomest of formats that technically doesn't exist on Arena, but totally should. We're playing in the Midweek Magic event, Historic Pauper. So join me of course in the Historic Pauper Midweek of Magic event for a deck that I am simply calling Batburn. But before we continue, if you do like any of the content that I do, please like, follow, and subscribe wherever you watch the content so you don't miss out on any of the gameplay, booster pack openings, deck decks, and so much more. Longtime viewers of the channel know how we do it. We have to talk of course about the stats of the deck before we jump right into it. So our Rakdos Batburn deck is an average mana curve of about 2.2. We're running of course black and red mana. We're looking at 12 creatures total. We're looking at 8 instants, 18 sorceries, 7 artifacts, and 22 lands. So overall, as the name of the deck implies, we're simply going to take advantage of the fact that our Mirkwood Bats here are going to be the star of the show that's going to hopefully burn out our opponent with all the tokens that we can create and use as synergies. Mirkwood Bats is a 4 mana bat creature that's a 2/3 with flying, and it simply reads, whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. Now, that's a simple little ability, but it's incredibly powerful for what we're trying to do. In order to do that, however, we do have a little bit of extra creature support to take advantage of the synergies that we're going to need for Mirkwood Bats. Working our way backwards, we also have a 3-drop slot, Mordor Trebuchet, an artifact wall that simply reads with Defender. This 1/4 artifact creature just says, whenever you attack with 1 or more goblin and or orcs, you create a 2/1 colorless construct artifact creature token with flying named Ballistic Boulder that's tapped and attacking. You sacrifice it at that token at the end of combat. Whew, that was a lot to say, but basically it just reads, as long as we have some kind of creature, in our case it's going to be of course goblins, as long as they swing and attack, we can create this extra little token that can also do some extra damage, and it does get sacrificed. Of course, the most important part about that is it creates itself and sacrifices, which will trigger off Mirkwood Bats to do a little bit more burn and damage to our opponent. However, we do want to of course create a little bit more synergy to push through extra damage, so we also have Goblin Blast Runner in the 1-drop slot. This simple 1 mana 1/2 goblin just reads, it'll get +2/+0 and have menace as long as we sacrifice a permanent this turn. We have of course a ton of permanents from the fact that we do create a ton of goblin tokens. Now, in order to take advantage of that, we have a ton of ways of doing that. We have Krenko's Command and we have Dragon Fodder. These of course will make of course all of the creature tokens that we need that will help synergize with Mirkwood Bats to do some burn damage. It'll help us of course generate more tokens with the Ballistic Boulder coming out from the Mordor Trebuchet, and if we have to sacrifice them for value, Goblin Blast Runner takes advantage of that. But how are we going to sacrifice these goblin creature tokens aside from just doing some aggro damage?
Good question.
Well, I'm glad you asked. So as far as our support to build around this, we will have cards such as Bone Shards. Bone Shards is just our simple removal, and it helps us of course take care of anything on the board as long as we can either discard a card or sacrifice a creature. Ideally, of course, you're going to sacrifice many of your little goblin tokens, so that way Blast Runner either can go off or Mirkwood Bats can then trigger itself. There of course is going to be a couple other ways to push through the remaining points of damage to get to your victory. We also have some burn in Improvised Club. This actual 2 mana instant allows us to do some damage to any target for 4 as long as we sacrifice an artifact or creature, which thankfully in our deck we have tons of artifacts and creatures to take advantage of that. And of course we do have a little extra burn damage, and also helps us filter out with cards such as Vampire's Kiss, which of course will do some life gain and drain, and of course it creates for us 2 blood tokens, which also synergizes well with the Mirkwood Bats. Not only for the fact that it creates the tokens, but also you can sacrifice those tokens to do some filtering and draw into some more action. And then finally, to do even more drawing of cards, we have Deadly Dispute. This awesome card has to be in the deck because it's a perfect staple for exactly what we're doing. We can sacrifice one of our goblins for some more value. We create a treasure token, which once again triggers off Mirkwood Bats. You basically get the idea here. Of course, it does the synergy, gets us more card draw, gets us more action, and of course some pseudo ramp with that treasure token. And then finally, if we do have some instances where our burn damage or even our sacrifice fodder just can't get through to certain creatures, we will have 2 copies of Bloody Betrayal in the 3-drop slot. By being able to take advantage of pulling away a creature, this means we can force through again the remaining points of damage before we can sacrifice it for even more value against our opponent. As for your mana base, you will have 7 swamps, you have 7 mountains since you have a nice little even split between your red and black mana. You'll have some Bloodfelt Caves for some life gain. You'll have the Drossford Bridge Specifically, you want 3 of these, of course, because you can actually sacrifice them to Improvise Club in a pinch if you absolutely have to. And then finally, a single copy of Tramway Station here. Usually you won't have to actually sacrifice to draw a card, but again, it is great to have in a pinch. Even if you are unable to get the bats on the far end here, the Trebuchet usually can do the job for you. You can take advantage of the Bloody Betrayal and then just finish off your opponent with the burn. Nothing really super crazy. It really is a highly synergistic deck, but of course there are going to be some tips I will give you in order to ensure you get to your victory. The tips, of course, in the early game is don't feel like you have to just blow up everything on the board immediately with cards like Improvise Club or Bone Shards. Hold on to those cards as much as you can in the early part of the game and just build up your army of Goblin creature tokens. Once you do have enough there where you can go wide, where you don't have to worry too much about losing them early on, you can take advantage of the Trebuchet, which of course will chip in some more damage. And once you get close to the end, you can finish them off with the burn spells of Improvise Clubs. And of course, once the coast is clear, put out your Mirkwood Bats and then start getting all the accumulated life drain from the card as you start sacrificing and creating more and more tokens. Keep in mind that one of the biggest weaknesses, of course, is if your opponent is able to keep the board clear with all the tokens that you create and also take off the Mirkwood Bats, it might take a little bit more time to get through. But remember that one of the biggest advantages of playing, of course, a Pauper deck is we honestly don't have to worry too much about wraths in this format because the majority of the cards, when it comes to removal, tend to just be spot removal as opposed to actual wraths. So keep that in mind, and that's one of the best advantages you will have when you play this deck. But my only other final thought is, if you are interested, of course, in seeing some other decks that we've created in this format, of course, I'll leave, of course, some links along the way for you. You can see, of course, on screen right now, I have a couple other decks that I made along the way that show off a couple more of the historic Pauper decks we built along the way, and they're all perfectly fine to use in this format if you are interested in trying to build up to some stuff. If you are interested, of course, in this archetype that we built, I will also put up as well a couple of the other versions that take advantage of Mirkwood Bats and a couple of the other Rakdos Burn and Sacrifice decks along the way. But my only other final thought I want to say is I hope you could take advantage of this deck that we put together for today. I know it's not a very long video, but rest assured we do have a lot more fun, longer deck techs that are we making down the line. Also, I just want to follow up with one other final thing before we end this is coming soon we will be taking us a little bit of a break at the end of the month for those of you that do watch a lot of my content. So just be advised that once we get to the end of January, we're going to take a small break where it's mostly going to be shorts that I'm going to be doing because I will be away for a little while taking a small vacation, and of course we'll be back soon. By the time we return, we'll be ready to jump into the Murders of Karloff Manor as that set drops very soon. But otherwise, the only other final thing I want to say about the deck is if you are a fan of token strategies, if you're a fan of going wide, if you're a fan of highly versatile synergistic decks that can burn out your opponent, be aggro in a pinch, or just sacrifice for a ton of value, by all means, give this deck a try. Even though it is only a Pauper deck, it is a lot of fun to play with it. You'll get your wins very quickly with this deck, and I assure you, when you finish off the event, you'll probably actually want to keep this deck. Maybe you want to upgrade it to something more powerful, but either way, you will definitely not be disappointed. That's all I have for you today. Thanks again for watching, everyone, and just remember that no matter what you do play in the game of life, always be sure to burn bright. Later!